we live our lives, sometimes we face what we might call uncertain times in our lives, challenges in our personal lives, in our families, and certainly in our world. As people of faith, how do we face these challenges? How do we put our faith to work, if you will? This sermon series is designed to help remind us and to help us develop even more tools for living our faith, to put our faith into action. And as I've been working on this series, I realized how much I'm being shaped by our Bible study book. Our current book is by Pastor Adam Hamilton, and just the title, I think, is helpful. It's called Unafraid, Living with Courage and Hope in Uncertain Times. When we began the study, we looked to see when the book was published, and it was published in the year 2018, which now seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? But the book is almost eerily relevant to today's world. What do we do when faced with a challenge, maybe fear, anxiety? And how do we build on our own foundation of faith so that we will have the resources and the relationships in place to rely on in such times? In our Bible study class, we've been sharing a lot about scriptures. I like to call them our go-to scriptures. You know, the ones that are really close to your heart, that maybe you've memorized and you turn to time after time. Each time it gives you just what you need. We've also talked about the role of music, and haven't we felt that? Singing our traditional hymns and also contemporary songs that might give us the same message in a little different format. We can draw on history and our tradition in the church. And from scripture and history both, we get role models, people that we can look to as human beings who maybe struggled with living their faith, who might have had faults and failures, but God worked through them. And I like to say that God works through us and for us and with us, and sometimes God works in spite of us, right? In spite of our failures. And so we can draw on our faith wells when we need to place deeper trust in God. In looking back at history, World War II was such a time for our world. In England, in the year 1938, a saying was captured on posters that was meant to inspire the people and help them. It said, "Keep calm and dig." Now that phrase kind of evolved over time, and it eventually became the slogan that I think a lot of us are familiar with: keep calm and carry on. It was to reassure the people and to help them in their fight. In the year 2000, owners of a bookstore found an old copy of this poster, and I think that's what led to its revival in more recent times. You've probably seen a number of takeoffs, and so I would like to draw on this tradition and add a little twist and use the word faith as a verb, and I'm going to change it to say, keep calm and faith on. Now you'll be hearing that a lot. It's the name of the series. Keep calm and faith on. Faith is used as a verb, and here we have a quote from former President Jimmy Carter. that said, "To me, faith is not just a noun, but also a verb. We must act on our faith, show our faith, keep calm, and faith on." And so throughout this series, we're going to be focusing on some characters in the Bible. And sometimes it may not be someone whose story you're very familiar with, or maybe someone who gets overshadowed by another character in the story. But our key verse remains the same for the series, but the image and perspective will change according to the biblical character's story. So our key verse is taken from the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, from the New Living Translation. Faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It is the evidence of things we cannot see. If you turn to chapter 11 in the book of Hebrews, you see this definition, and then we're given what I like to think of as a roll call of people through history and our tradition who have shown faith. They have kept calm and faithed on, if you will. So today, our focus is on Miriam, and the verse is placed from what would be Miriam's perspective, right? Looking at the river and the grasses there at the river and wondering how she can trust in God. Miriam is mentioned throughout the story of the Exodus of the Hebrew people, and she was a leader alongside her two younger brothers, Moses and Aaron. In hearing our lesson from the Bible, we may be tempted to focus on the baby Moses, because after all, he became a great leader, really the example of the greatest leader in the history of the Hebrew people. Or we may be focused on Pharaoh's daughter. It's interesting that God is not explicitly mentioned in this passage, and yet we know that God is the force behind all that happens. It is God's saving power at work in the life of Moses. Now, we have to go back into the history to remind ourselves that at this time, the Hebrew people did not have a land of their own. And when Joseph was living, they had a good relationship with the Pharaoh who ruled them. But by this time, Joseph has died, and the Pharaoh is feeling threatened by the growing strength of the Hebrew people. The Pharaoh plans to destroy all of the Hebrew people, and he begins by issuing an order that all the Hebrews' baby boys should be killed. One young mother resists the orders of the Pharaoh, and she engages in a plan to save her beautiful baby boy. She decides to place her baby into a basket and to place the basket on the Nile River. She tells the baby's older sister to watch him. Now, we've seen lots of artistic renderings of this scene, paintings, pictures, even in movies. You remember the Ten Commandments. Usually I've seen Miriam depicted as maybe a preteen, a little older. But I read in one commentary that Miriam may have been as young as 5 years old when this occurred. And it kind of gives you a little different perspective on that. How could such a young girl show such courage, defying the Pharaoh's orders? How could she show such trust? How did she have the faith and trust to see in the empty basket a way for God to save her baby brother? She trusted her mother, of course, and followed what her mother instructed her to do. And we can kind of infer in the story that both her mother and her father must have been people of faith to have put together such a plan. But it still would take enormous courage to do what she did, to walk right up to the Pharaoh's daughter and offer a Hebrew woman to be the nursemaid for the baby. Listen to our definition of faith from the scriptures again, and this time imagine yourself as that little child looking through the bulrushes. Faith shows the reality of what we hope for, is the evidence of things we cannot see. God gives Miriam the ability to act on her faith. We know the end of the story that Moses is saved, and he is later called by God to lead the people to freedom, to the promised land. Water plays a major role in this story around his saving, and water will play into another major act of God's saving power. Remember, as they leave Egypt, the Pharaoh's armies pursue them, and they come to the great body of the Red Sea, and what will they do? God provides a way. God tells Moses what he needs to do to get the people through the Red Sea and to destroy the army pursuing them. It is a tremendous experience. I just can't imagine what it would have been like for them in this dangerous situation, life and death, and for the body of water to part, for them to walk through safely. In response to this great miracle, Moses and Miriam lead the people in a time of worship, thanking God and praising God, singing and dancing, playing bells. No, I think it was a tambourine, but it could have been bells, right? They're playing instruments. It's a great time of singing, and their song of praise is recorded in the book of Exodus, chapter 15. Just a little trivia for you. That's the first song recorded in the Bible. This is an image of Miriam leading the women. She teaches them and leads them in singing and dancing and praise to God. Miriam is celebrated for her leadership during an uncertain time for the Hebrew people. And she is held in high regard today by people of the Jewish faith. She is the first woman mentioned as a prophet in Scripture. And she is one of only 7 major female prophets in the entire Hebrew Bible, or our Old Testament. An interesting note about Miriam: unlike most of the women mentioned in the Bible, she is never described as being someone's wife, and she is never described as being someone's mother. The Greek name Mary is the equivalent of the Hebrew Miriam. For me, I would say that Miriam is a person who stays calm in the face of uncertainty, and she indeed faiths on, if you use that as a verb. But Miriam and her brother Aaron later run into a little conflict with Moses. They want a diversity of voices to be heard in the leadership of the Hebrew people. And this causes them to question the authority of Moses. Miriam is stricken with leprosy, and the explanation given in Scripture is that Miriam doubted God. She is punished for a short period of time, but she does not lose the care and support of her people. And Miriam is celebrated still today for her courage. I believe that one of the things that we can learn from Miriam is that to show our faith, we need to trust in God. Even when it seems impossible to us, God can make a way. And I say that slowly because I think we, as the people of Salem, can give witness to this many times over. And very recently, when we can't even see a way, we trust that God will provide. God is faithful. God will make a way. And so we can act on our trust. This is how we can live with courage and hope, even in the most uncertain of times. When you're digging deep for your courage and to act on your faith, remember this little girl who helps to save the baby, her brother. And as the story continues and God is at work, this allows God to call the baby as an adult, Moses, to lead her people to freedom into a land flowing with milk and honey. Remember Miriam as a woman who leads others in praise and worship, to give thanks to God for saving them and making them a people who would live in covenant relationship with God. Let us be inspired as we remember the faithful actions of Miriam. This is a quote by Frederick Buechner. And one of the things that he said is, faith is better understood as a verb than a noun, as a process rather than a possession. Sometimes we say, I have faith, as if it's something that you possess, that you own, that you keep for yourself. But it's really something that we do. In the book of James, we're reminded that faith without action is dead. But in this quote, he also says, faith is not being sure where you're going, but going anyway. I think that's a good summary for us. Miriam couldn't have known where it would lead when her mother told her to watch her baby brother in a basket floating on the Nile River. She did it anyway. We don't have to know all the answers, but we do need to act, showing that we trust in God's saving power to provide the answers for us. Keep calm and faith on, like Miriam.